Hello and welcome to Insights, the podcast with your host, Joe Pane. Join me in this deep exploration of our personal journeys from ambition to meaning, where we stop living life fast and start living life deep. This is a journey of waking up and realizing that our lives have never been about us, but about others. True success leaves positive ripple effects on other souls. I believe that success needs to be redefined from our own personal ambitious endeavors to be redefined as the value that we leave and give to others around us. Join me now as we begin this journey to deeper connections, even more fulfillment, some fun, curiosity, life, love, and all good things. Your deeper journey from ambition to meaning starts right now. G'day everyone, it's Joe here. Welcome to episode 53. We're in December 2020. The year is coming to a close pretty quick. And let's hope that 2021 is a little bit different, huh? Anyway, unfortunately, the start of 2021 for, literally half the world is quite awful, as we know, in terms of all the shutdowns happening across the United States and Europe and other parts of the world. So, we can only hope for the best for them. But here on the other side of the world, it seems to be an opposite experience. And where I'm coming to you, of course, live from, well, not live, you're listening to a recording of this, but I live in Melbourne, Australia. So it's wonderful to see our wonderful city reopening. So here we are. So what I want to share with you, I want to have an insight. I want to ramble on about my thinking around what does it mean that the soul creates and that the mind reacts? What does that actually mean? For a long time in my life, I thought that part of my purpose was to discover who I am. And whilst that's true on so many levels, and where I'm about to go with this, I can easily be misunderstood. So what I want to share with you is, what if we weren't here to discover who we are, but instead to create who we want to become? To create who we want to become. And we're faced with so many choice points, micro moments, I call them, in our everyday living, when we can choose differently to who we want to become. And when we are consciously choosing to respond to a situation differently to how we have in the past, and I'm going to give you I'll share with you an everyday simple example of what I'm talking about here, but I'll just keep going down this direction for a moment. I'll get to the example in a moment as well. And that is that we've got a choice in life that quite often when something happens or something triggers us, normally what happens is we're unconsciously overly dependent upon historical data, where, in other words, we're thinking about a similar experience that happened in our past, and then we think about how we dealt with this particular situation in the past, and we tend to just default to how we have always been. We default to how we've always been in response to that situation. So we're coming from our mind. So when we're actually gathering historical experience from our narrative to make sense of what's going on through this via this trigger, how this particular person or this particular situation has triggered us, we tend to react in the same way because of what the past has taught us. Instead, the soul, so that's what it means when the mind reacts. So what does it mean when the soul creates? Well, what this means is that we no longer think about the history. We don't rely on or over-rely on our narrative, our historical narrative, but instead we choose to respond differently to the situation. So, for example, and I might have shared this with you in past episodes. You might be walking down the street, you see your friend across the road, you wave at them, they don't wave back. Now, maybe in the past, I might have responded, and I'm just making this up as an example, I might have responded in the past or reacted in the past. So reacting from my mind, I could be saying something to myself like, oh, my friend doesn't like me. When that is a completely imagined level of truth. And I want to link 3 levels of truth here to what I'm talking about, and then I'll give you a whole example of how this, what I'm trying to explain here. So what we have is we've got imagined truth, which is our distorted perception of reality. There's apparent truth, which is our observation of reality. And then there's actual truth, which are the facts of the situation. So going back to that moment, if I'm walking down a busy street, I'll wave to my friend across the other side of the road or the other side of the street. They don't wave back. The actual truth is they just haven't waved back. Anything beyond that is my interpretation of it. I'm going to link this into the soul and the mind in a moment. Assumed truth is where I say to myself, my friend didn't see me. I'm assuming they didn't see me. I'm assuming my friend was distracted or something like that. They didn't see me. So that's an observation I'm making about the situation. So I'm kind of like one step removed from the actual reality. And then imagined truth is where I say to myself, my friend doesn't like me, which is completely manufactured by the egotistical or the egocentric mind. So if my mind is reacting to my friend not waving to me and putting a meaning on it, putting a spin on it, that is, my friend doesn't like me, that imagined truth is something that is an echo from my past. Somehow, based on the accumulation of my historical narrative from my past, I've come to this supposed very loose, distorted so-called conclusion as to what has actually happened in that particular micro moment. So if I'm coming from my mind, I am stuck in imagined truth of that moment. But if it's true that my soul creates, then I can just simply look at the situation and say, well, my friend just simply hasn't seen me, or my friend has not waved back. That's the only truth I have actual access to. That's the only fact that I have is my friend hasn't waved back. And it could be for 150 different reasons that my friend hasn't waved back. The ego says, well, it could be that they don't like you, but that's just the ego. That's the mind reacting. The soul in that moment, I have an opportunity to create who I want to become. And if I want to become someone who does not get caught up in micro mini dramas, if I want to become someone who is more open-minded and free of judgment and more compassionate, loving, kind, patient, that kind of thing, then I'm going to approach that situation from actual truth, which means I'm going to stop myself in my tracks spinning a meaning on what that could mean. That meaning my friend not waving back. What could it mean? What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. So we've got these three levels of truth that I hope that you're finding interesting, because most people, unfortunately, their reality is stuck in imagined truth. Now, I've got a few more things to say about imagined truth in a very resourceful way too, and I'll get to that in a moment. So the soul creates. In any given moment, we have got a choice on how we want to respond. If we rely on default reactions, if we rely on, an automated reaction to, men, women, money, relationships, family, opportunities, whatever it is that we're reacting to, then we're nothing more than slaves to our mind. And we are either slaves to our mind or we're loyal to the mission of our soul, whatever that means to you. I've quoted C.S. Lewis before on past episodes, where C.S. Lewis, was well known for also saying that, we don't have a soul, we are a soul. What we have is a body. I love C.S. Lewis. I love his language. And at every given moment, we've got a choice. With awareness, we can choose who we want to become next. And really, at the end of the day, there is only one emotion that exists in all of life. And that, of course, is love. Everything else, the further away from love that we move, listen to this very carefully, the further away from love that we move on the spectrum of emotion, the more distorted our experience of love is. And so, in other words, the further away from love that we are, the more amplified the distortion. Therefore, we're living in imagined truth, because imagined truth is distorted reality. The closer we move to love, the more we move to actual truth, to ultimate reality, whatever that means to you, to actual truth. So that way we don't get caught up in the dramas as much. It's fascinating that the color white is made up of all of the other colors. We know that all the other colors are made up of a combination of the primary colors. So all the other colors are extensions of the primary colors. All of the primary colors mixed together create white. So all of the other colors are contained within white. love is the white of emotion. All of the other emotions, extending all the way to the darkest and most extensive of fears, are all part of love. So you've got fear at one end of the spectrum, love at the other end of the spectrum, but all we actually have is love. Fear is just simply a distorted expression of love. That's what it is. So the closer we are to living our life closer to fear, the more we're slaves to our mind, and the more we're living out in a psychological imagined truth that is created by the ego to put a spin on all of these experiences that we're having, to keep us safe, to keep us away from responsibilities, and to keep us or seize us from growing. The closer we move toward love, the more we let go of imagined truths, transform into becoming someone who's aware of apparent truth, which is becoming more the observer, the observation of reality, as we move toward actual truth, which is looking at it from a more pure, white, pure love emotion. I hope this is making sense. So let me just do a little bit of a mini recap of what I'm carrying on about here, because it's clear in my mind, isn't it in yours? So there are 3 levels of truth: actual, apparent, and imagined. Actual truth are the facts. Apparent truth are our observations. Imagined truth is our distortion, our distorted perception of life. The mind reacts when it's caught up in imagined truths. The closer we are to actual truth, or beyond the observer, beyond the apparent truth, the more we are closer to love, and the more we are choosing to create who we want to be in the moment. So therefore, if we're creating who we want to become in the moment and not respond or retaliate the way we have in the past, we're now becoming more loyal to the soul's mission, whatever that is, instead of becoming slaves or remaining slaves of our mind, slaves of our ego. It's fascinating. I'm going to give you a ridiculous footy example, okay? Just forgive me for this. Be patient with me. Be loving. Be kind. So earlier this year, me and my sons were watching a final. It was Collingwood versus West Coast, okay? And we beat them by a point, and it was just glorious. The season was over a week later, but that doesn't matter. We had this glorious moment together, the 3 of us. And there was a point in the game where the West Coast player, we're Magpie fans, as you can tell, and the West Coast player became extremely annoying and very arrogant when he kicked this goal and remonstrated with one of the defenders of our footy team, right? And he was extremely arrogant and very cocky and annoying. And my sons were reacting to this. And then I just thought to myself, hold on, this is one of those micro moments that you talk about. A very, very easy micro moment that has got nothing to do with me personally. It's just an observation of a game. Why don't I come from the observer? Why don't I come from apparent truth? Why don't I come from actual truth? And the actual truth is the opposition player is obviously very happy and delighted with the fact that he's kicked a goal in a very pivotal part of the game. What if I came from that, which I decided to just give that a go? And that player kept on with his behaviors as the game progressed. And in coming from the actual truth, which is just simply just thinking to myself, he's expressing love. He's expressing his version of love of the game, love of wanting to win, love of communing with his fellow teammates and enjoying this wondrous experience in front of, a beautiful crowd in a wonderful stadium. That's the spin I gave it. And suddenly I wasn't as attached to the situation anymore. I wasn't as triggered by the situation anymore. So the more triggered we are by life, the more we're living in the fear end of the spectrum, which means we're ensconced in imagined reality, imagined truth, which is created by the ego. Now, there's a resourceful, positive thing here I want to get to in a moment about imagined truth in a moment. However, what I want to harp on about here is that at every micro moment, there's so many moments in life every day, choice points, where we can actually create a different version of us, when we can choose to respond differently. Maybe in the past you've been easy to anger on the road when someone crosses you on the road and does something wrong. when someone else has clearly broken the rules of the road and you haven't. That's a fact, right? If that's happened, that's a fact. If they've gone through a stop sign and nearly hit your car, the fact is that they've broken the law, right? That's the actual truth. The apparent truth is that they nearly injured you, and the imagined truth is your reaction, emotional reaction to calling them names, and maybe in your car without them hearing you, you might be abusing them by calling them all these colorful names. Now, in moments like that, we can choose to be slaves to our ego, slaves to our mind, slaves to fear, or we can be loyal to the mission of our soul. And instead, we can look at it differently. We can ask ourselves this very question. We can say to ourselves, well, hold on. Have I ever innocently, purely, accidentally gone through a stop sign? The answer is, yes, I have. And what was going on for you in that moment? I don't know. I was thinking about something else, or something else that was important in my life. I don't know. Whatever was going on in my life at the time, I just didn't see the stop sign. So I have been in that position before. So when we start to see it from the other side, that we've been there before, then suddenly we're just looking at the actual truth. And the actual truth is the person's gone through a stop sign. I'm sure they didn't mean to. I don't actually know, but I'm assuming they didn't mean to. And they got an almighty fright when they saw me, just like I got an almighty fright when I saw them. So I know that it's accidental, and that's all there is to it. So I don't get triggered by it anymore, like the way that maybe we would have in the past. Stop living life on an imagined truth level and start living life at an apparent truth and actual truth level, at the observation level and the fact level, in terms of what's going on, rather than imagined truth. So, and the other part of the mini recap is so much for a mini recap, is that every other emotion removed from love, the further away from love that we are, all we are experiencing is an expanded or amplified distortion of love. All fears are amplified distortion of love. Anger is an amplified distortion of love because there's only love and there's nothing else. Please remember the analogy I shared with you there is that white is the only true color that exists because white is the only color that contains all of the other colors in it. Love is the only emotion that exists that contains all of the other emotions in it. And the closer to love that we are, the more actual our truth is. So we're closer to whatever we call universal intelligence, high levels of consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it. And that's part of the journey of awareness. Now, I said to you a moment ago that there can be a useful part to imagined truth. Well, sitting here at my table where I'm actually delivering this and recording this podcast, to my right here, as I look up to the wall, is a poster representing imagined truth, which is I don't want to say it's my wife and I, it's our family's vision. It's our poster, our vision, a poster of our visions of what we want to have even more of and introduce into our lives over the next decade. So you can use imagined truth from a perspective of love to create a future that hasn't happened yet. That's where I believe imagined truth is very, very useful, very, very powerful, and very, very exciting. As long as when we arrive to that future experience, we're not continuing to create imaginary meanings and we experience the actuality of it, the realization of it. That's actual truth, another way of looking at it. So anyway, I hope that there's something in this here for you today, that there's something that you're gleaning, that you're taking away, that is adding to your language. And please remember next time you're triggered by a person or by an experience of some kind, that if you're triggered, you're living an imagined truth. It's a distorted expression of love where you are creating a meaning around it that's not based on fact. Easier said than done? Sure, I would agree with that. But it's the practice of the awareness that makes the difference. The mind reacts. The soul creates. Whether we are aware of it or whether we are not, we are definitely, absolutely creating. And most of us are creating what we don't want because that's where we put our attention. And that's a whole other conversation. So I hope this episode 53, I trust that it's been, some kind of value to you, and maybe it kicks in another level of awareness next time someone pisses you off. Okay? So, and please remember, there is only one emotion, love. It's been sung for centuries. It's been spoken of for eons that love is all that exists. All of the other emotions are contained within it, just like the palette of all of the wonderful, incredible colors of the world are contained within the color white. All of the emotions are contained within love. The further away from love that you are, the more ensconced you are in imagined truth. The closer to love, the more actual the truth. The more genuine your connections are, the more authentic your relationships become from an actual truth level, because the actual truth is you being you. The imagined truth is being the ego version of you, which is that distorted version of love that I've been talking about. All right, so I'm going to wrap up. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'm loving all your 5-star reviews. I think there's 84 5-star reviews there when I last checked a couple of weeks ago. Love it. I really appreciate your support. And I really love the messages I'm getting on LinkedIn, private messages there, and on Facebook Messenger. Deeply appreciate it. Remember, you can always connect with what I'm doing online on at Joe Pane Insights on Facebook fan page or at LinkedIn. And of course, if you haven't given me a 5-star review here, and you genuinely, it's your actual truth that you feel that this is worth 5 stars, and I would love your expression of it online on iTunes. And of course, if you're not enjoying this podcast, keep it to yourself. All right, excellent. All right. Enjoy your morning, your afternoon, your evening, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to reconnecting with you in episode 54 coming up next. Thanks, guys. Bye for now. I'm Joe Pane, and you've been listening to Insights, the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you're thoroughly loving the journey of these messages, please feel more than welcome to leave a review. And be sure to leave a comment on what you've been learning and how useful this has been to you, and how you've been sharing this with those around you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to being with you again very soon in the next episode of Insights, the podcast.